The city outside the car window was a blur of sparkling lights, each one a tiny star stuck to the earth, but Serena saw none of it. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, were cold as ice. The expensive silk of her simple blue dress felt foreign against her skin, a costume for a part she never imagined playing. She was driving towards a new life, a life that was not her choice, but a necessary sacrifice. Her family was in deep, deep trouble, the kind of trouble that could erase everything they had ever known, and she was the only one who could stop it. The solution had been presented to her parents on a silver platter of legal documents and unthinkable promises. An arrangement. A marriage. But not a marriage to one man. A marriage to two. The car slid to a silent stop before a pair of immense wrought iron gates. They swung open without a sound, revealing a long, winding driveway that cut through a garden so perfect it looked like a painting. At the end of the driveway stood a house. It wasn't just a big house. It was a castle of glass and stone, modern and intimidating, with windows so large they seemed to swallow the night sky. This was the home of Kane and Kael, the billionaire twins. Men of immense power, mystery, and, according to the rumors, a shared taste for the unique. Serena took a shaky breath, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was their new unique acquisition. A stern-faced woman in a crisp suit met her at the towering front door. Not a word was spoken as Serena was led through hallways that echoed with her own nervous footsteps. The inside of the house was all sharp angles, cold marble, and stunning art, but it felt empty, like a beautiful shell without a soul. They finally entered a room that was all warmth and shadow, a library with walls of books and a fireplace where real logs crackled and popped. "Wait here," the woman said, her voice as crisp as her suit, and then she was gone, leaving Serena utterly alone. Serena stood in the middle of the room, trembling. She was 19 years old and had never even been properly kissed. Her life had been one of quiet books, simple dreams, and helping in her father's small shop. The concept of love had always been a fuzzy, distant fantasy, something that happened to other people in movies. Now she was standing in a palace, waiting to meet the two men who were now her husbands, and the word virgin felt like a brand on her forehead. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to still the shaking. Then a door on the other side of the library opened. Two figures stepped through side by side, and Serena's breath caught in her throat. They were identical, and yet, from the very first second, she could tell them apart. They were both tall, with broad shoulders and faces so handsome it was almost painful to look at. But their energy was completely different. The one on the right had a slight, easy smile on his face. His eyes, a warm, friendly blue, crinkled at the corners as he looked her over. He was the first to move, stepping forward with a confident, graceful walk. "Serena," he said, and his voice was like warm honey, smooth and sweet. "I'm Kael. It's so wonderful to finally meet you. You're even more beautiful than we were told." His words were a comfort, a small life raft in her stormy sea of fear. Her eyes then drifted to the one on the left. Kane. He had not moved. He stood perfectly still, his arms crossed over his chest, his gaze fixed on her. His eyes were the same shade of blue as his brother's, but where Kael's were a sunny sky, Kane's were a deep, frozen lake. He studied her, not as a person but as a puzzle, taking in her fear, her wide eyes, the way she clutched her own arms. He didn't smile. The silence from him was heavier than all of Kael's charming words. Kael continued to talk, filling the tense air with pleasantries about the house, the weather, anything to put her at ease. He was trying, and a part of Serena was deeply grateful for it. But her attention was irrevocably pulled back to Kane. He was the storm and Kael was the calm. Finally, Kane uncrossed his arms and took a single, slow step forward. The room seemed to shrink. He was closer now, and she could feel the power radiating from him. "It's time we set the rules," Kane said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated deep in Serena's bones. It was not a loud voice, but it commanded absolute attention. Kael fell silent, his smile softening into something more serious. Kane's eyes never left Serena's. "You understand the arrangement. You are ours. Both of ours. There is no choosing." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. "The marriage is to both of us. Your life is with both of us. And your nights," he said, his gaze intensifying, "belong to both of us." He took one more step, now standing only a few feet from her. He was so close she could smell his scent, something clean and wild like the forest after rain. He leaned in slightly, and the world narrowed to just his frozen lake eyes. "You'll take both of us tonight." The statement was so blunt, so final, it stole the air from her lungs. There was no room for argument, no room for hesitation. It was a fact as solid as the marble floor beneath her feet. Her fate was sealed not with a question but with a decree. Later, after a silent, awkward dinner where Kael did most of the talking, Serena found herself being led by both men up a grand, curving staircase. Her heart was a frantic drum in her ears. They walked her not to a simple bedroom, but to a master suite that was larger than her entire family's apartment. The room was dominated by an enormous bed, and the sight of it made her legs feel weak. The brothers were different here in the privacy of the bedroom. The public masks were gone. Kael's charm became a more focused, tender warmth. Kane's stern silence became a potent, watchful intensity. They didn't rush. They stood before her, and Kael reached out first, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "It's okay to be nervous, Serena," he whispered. "We will be gentle." Then Kane moved. He didn't speak. He simply lifted his hand and cupped the side of her face. His touch was not soft like Kael's, it was firm, possessive. His thumb stroked her jawline, and a shiver, hot and cold at the same time, shot down her spine. This was it. The moment of no return. Kael was the one to lean in and press his lips to hers. It was her first kiss. It was soft, exploring and sweet. It felt like she imagined a first kiss should feel, a little shy, a little curious. It made a warm flutter start in her stomach. But then as Kael pulled away, Kane was there. He tilted her face up towards his. "Now me," he said, his voice a husky command. His kiss was nothing like his brother's. It was not a question, it was an answer to a question she didn't even know she had asked. His lips were demanding, firm and hungry. He kissed her deeply, claiming her mouth until she was breathless and dizzy, her hands clutching his shoulders to keep from falling. They worked together, their movements synchronized from a lifetime of understanding each other. Kael unzipped her dress, his hands soft and encouraging, while Kane kept her focused on him with his intense gaze, his hands on her waist, holding her steady. The silk dress pooled at her feet, and she stood before them in just her simple undergarments, feeling more exposed than she ever had in her life. But they didn't laugh or look disappointed. They looked hungry. "Beautiful," Kael breathed, his eyes full of genuine awe. Kane just gave a slow, single nod, his gaze burning a trail over her skin. They led her to the bed, and the world became a haze of new sensations. The softness of the sheets, the heat of their bodies surrounding hers, the contrast of their touches. Kael's hands were patient and teaching, showing her where to touch, how a simple caress could make her gasp. Kane's hands were bolder, learning the curves of her body with a confident possessiveness that left her aching for more. They took turns kissing her, touching her, worshipping her body until the last of her fear was burned away, replaced by a rising, unfamiliar need. When the final moment came, when she was no longer a girl but a woman, it was Kael who was inside her, his body moving with a gentle rhythm, his whispers in her ear telling her she was perfect. But her head was turned, and her eyes were locked with Kane's. He was watching them, his expression a mix of fierce pride and raw desire, and he held her hand, his grip strong and anchoring. It was for him that she finally let out a soft cry, not of pain but of release, of surrender, of a strange and powerful beginning. As the night settled into a deep quiet, Serena lay in the enormous bed, nestled between the two powerful men who were now her husbands. Kael was already asleep on one side, his arm thrown gently across her waist. On her other side, Kane was awake, his body turned towards her, one hand resting on her hip as if to make sure she didn't float away. She was no longer a virgin. She was no longer just Serena. She was theirs. And as she closed her eyes, exhausted and overwhelmed, the last thing she felt was not regret, but a confusing, terrifying and thrilling sense of belonging. The promise had been made, and her new life had truly begun. The morning sun streamed into the massive bedroom, painting golden stripes across the tangled sheets and the three sleeping forms. Serena awoke slowly, the events of the previous night returning to her not as a shocking dream, but as a heavy, warm reality. The space beside her was empty where Kael had been, but on her other side Kane's solid presence remained. He was already awake, propped on an elbow, just watching her. His frozen lake eyes were unreadable in the soft light. No good morning, no smile. Just a long, silent look that made her heart do a little flip before he finally rose from the bed without a word and disappeared into the bathroom. It was a pattern that would quickly become the new normal of her life. The days began to form a strange, beautiful rhythm within the walls of the glass and stone mansion. Serena was given everything she could possibly want. A wardrobe filled with clothes softer than clouds, a jewelry box that glittered with stones she had only ever seen in magazines, and the freedom to explore every corner of her new, sprawling home. But the most precious gifts came from her two husbands, and they could not have been more different. Kael was the sun. He was her guide, her friendly companion in this strange new world. He planned adventures for them. He took her flying in his private helicopter, holding her hand as they soared above the city, her delighted laughter mixing with the roar of the engine. He filled her afternoons with shopping sprees where he insisted on buying her anything that made her eyes light up, and long, lazy lunches where he made her tell him stories about her childhood, listening with a captivated smile. His affection was easy and open. He would kiss her in the hallway for no reason, his lips always soft and smiling. He would whisper how beautiful she was, how happy she made him, his words a constant, warm balm on her uncertain soul. Loving Kael was as simple and natural as breathing. It felt like the romance she had read about in books. Kane was the moon. He was distant, often disappearing into his home office for hours, the door closed firmly against the world. He spoke little during their shared meals, letting Kael fill the silence. He never bought her gifts. At first, Serena interpreted his silence as coldness, perhaps even regret about their arrangement. She felt a sting of rejection every time he walked past without looking at her. But slowly she began to notice things. Small, quiet things that spoke louder than any of Kael's grand gestures. She mentioned offhandedly one evening that she missed the simple hot chocolate her mother used to make, the kind with the tiny marshmallows. The next morning, a steaming mug of it, perfectly prepared, was waiting for her on the breakfast table. Kane was reading a newspaper, saying nothing, but she knew. When they were forced to attend a large, intimidating gala, Kael was her charming date, dancing with her and introducing her to everyone. But it was Kane who stood silently at the edge of the dance floor, a dark, watchful sentinel. When a stuffy older man crowded her a little too closely, it was Kane who appeared at her side in an instant, his mere presence making the man mumble an apology and retreat. He never said, "I will protect you." He just did it. And his touches. They were rare, but when they happened they burned. While Kael's hands were always gentle and seeking, Kane's were possessive and decisive. A firm hand on the small of her back, guiding her through a doorway. A strong grip on her wrist, pulling her gently to him for a sudden, deep kiss that left her breathless before he let her go and walked away. His love wasn't in his words, it was in his actions. It was a language of silent protection and intense, focused desire. This was the battle that began to rage inside Serena's heart. It was not a battle between good and evil, but between the sun and the moon. When she was with Kael, she felt happy, cherished, and light. It was easy and fun. But when Kane was in the room, even if he was silent in the corner, she was acutely aware of him. Her body thrummed with a nervous energy, a desperate need for him to look at her, to acknowledge her. His rare, intense kisses haunted her, feeling more real and profound than all of Kael's sweet affection. The nights were where the battle became most intense. In the darkness of their shared bedroom, the brothers' approaches were a perfect reflection of their daytime selves. Kael was a patient, tender lover, focused on her pleasure, his movements slow and worshipful. He made her feel adored. But when it was Kane's turn, the dynamic shifted into something darker, wilder, and more profound. He would look into her eyes as he touched her, his gaze holding hers captive. His kisses were not soft, they were claiming. His hands on her body were not asking, they were taking what was his, and in that taking, he made her feel a powerful aching need she never knew she possessed. She began to crave that intensity, that feeling of being utterly consumed. She found herself turning to him in the dark, her body seeking his specific, demanding brand of affection. One afternoon she was in the garden with Kael and he was making her laugh with a funny story. It was a perfect, sunny moment. Then she glanced up and saw Kane watching them from his office window several floors up. He was just a silhouette, but she could feel his gaze. Her laughter died in her throat. In that moment, a terrifying thought crystallized in her mind. She was not just falling in love with both of them. She was in love with both of them. Deeply. Truly. But differently. She loved Kael like a best friend, a joyful partner. But she loved Kane with a desperate, hungry passion that felt like it was carved into her very soul. The confusion was a heavy weight on her chest. How could one heart hold two such different loves? Was it fair to Kael that her most passionate feelings were reserved for his brother? Was it fair to Kane that she also cherished Kael's easy warmth? She felt pulled in too, a rope in a silent tug-of-war between the twin sun and moon. She started to withdraw, becoming quieter, getting lost in her own thoughts. She saw the brothers exchange worried glances over her head. The beautiful, strange family they were trying to build felt fragile, like a glass vase teetering on the edge of a table, and she was terrified that her own conflicted heart was the thing that would finally send it shattering to the floor. The peace of the first few weeks was gone, replaced by the quiet, aching storm of a heart that did not know how to love two men without breaking itself in half. The tension in the beautiful glass house became a thick, heavy fog that everyone breathed but no one mentioned. Serena moved through the grand rooms like a ghost, her smiles at Kael's jokes a little too slow, her body tense and wary whenever Kane entered the space. She could feel the weight of their silent questions, their concern. Kael tried to lift her spirits with plans for a trip to Paris, with gifts of rare books he knew she would love. Kane simply watched her, his frozen lake eyes now shadowed with a frustration he would not voice. The distance between them felt like a canyon, and Serena stood on one side, while the two men she loved stood together on the other, and she had no idea how to build a bridge. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. The three of them were in the library, the same room where they had first met. Kael was trying to engage her in a conversation about a new art exhibit. Kane was standing by the fireplace, his silence more deafening than the crackling logs. Serena, feeling the walls closing in, the guilt and confusion choking her, suddenly stood up. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. Tears she had been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. "I'm so sorry." She turned to flee, but a strong hand caught her wrist. It wasn't Kael. It was Kane. He had crossed the room in 3 swift strides. "You can't do what, Serena?" he asked, his voice low and rough, demanding an answer she could no longer avoid. "This," she cried, gesturing wildly between him and Kael. I can't figure out my own heart. It's not fair to either of you. I love you both, but it's different and it's all wrong and I feel like I'm breaking." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking, all her composure gone. It was Kael who spoke next, his voice surprisingly gentle and understanding. "Serena, look at me." She turned her tear-streaked face to him. "Did you ever think that maybe it's supposed to be different?" he asked softly. "We are not the same man. We are two different people who love the same woman. We don't expect you to love us in the same way." Kane's grip on her wrist softened, becoming a hold, an anchor. "The only thing that is wrong," he said, his intense gaze boring into her, "is you trying to tear yourself in two. You are ours. Both of ours. Your heart is big enough for both of us because it is our heart. It belongs to this family. To the three of us." His words, so simple and so certain, sliced through all her confusion. They weren't asking her to choose. They were asking her to accept. To stop fighting the unique shape of their love. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over her, so powerful it made her knees weak. She looked from Kael's warm, accepting face to Kane's fiercely possessive one, and the battle inside her simply ended. She took a deep, shuddering breath, wiping her tears. "You are two halves of my one whole heart," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I love Kael's laughter and I love Kane's quiet care. I don't want to choose. I choose both. I choose this family." What happened after that confession was a transformation. The fog in the house lifted, replaced by a brilliant, clear light. The brothers, freed from the fear of her choosing one over the other, opened their hearts to her completely. The love between the three of them deepened into something unshakable and forever. The spicy, tense moments in their bedroom melted into something even more powerful. Now, when they came to her, it was with a united front of adoration and a deep, soul-connecting passion. There was no more jealousy, no more silent competition. There was only the three of them, a perfect, balanced triangle of love and desire. Kael's tender worship taught her the beauty of intimacy, while Kane's fierce possession showed her the power of raw passion, and together, they made her feel like the most cherished, powerful woman in the world. Years flowed by like a gentle river. The giant glass house was no longer a cold castle but a warm, lived-in home, filled with the sound of laughter and little footsteps. Serena was no longer the scared girl who had arrived on the doorstep. She was a confident, radiant woman, secure in the love of her two husbands. She stood now in their sun-drenched garden, watching the scene that proved their love was not just real but enduring. Two little boys, one with Kael's sunny smile and the other with Kane's serious, dark eyes, were chasing a butterfly, their joyful shouts filling the air. Kael came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "They have your energy, my love," he whispered, kissing her neck. A moment later, Kane stood beside her, his presence a solid comfort. He didn't put his arm around her. Instead, his hand found hers, their fingers lacing together in a familiar, strong grip. He looked down at their joined hands, then at their children and finally at her. For the first time since she had met him, Serena saw his frozen lake eyes melt completely, filled with a love so deep and profound it needed no words. They were not two men and one wife anymore. They were one. One unique, unbreakable family. They had faced the world's confusion and their own doubts and had built a forever on their own terms. The sun and the moon no longer battled in her sky. They simply took turns shining down on their beautiful, complete world, a world built on a promise that one heart, when it is true and brave, is indeed big enough for two great loves. If you've been swept away by the unique and passionate love story of Kane, Kael, and Serena, and you want to discover more unforgettable romances that will make your heart pound and your soul believe in forever, then you absolutely cannot miss what comes next. Our channel is filled with tales of love that defies the ordinary, of hearts that find their missing pieces in the most unexpected ways. We have so many more stories to share with you, stories just waiting to become your new favorite escape. So do not miss a single one. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you are always the first to know when a new epic romance begins. Your next unforgettable love story is just one click away.